I really welcome this debate, and I'm really thankful to the Sinn Féin senators for bringing this forward. I'm a professional youth worker. I qualified as a youth worker in 2001, and I was the second year of the course. It was in UCC. The second year, we were the second graduates. So the Youth Work Act came out that time. The Youth Work Act 2001 was out at that stage. And you know, we have come a long way, and it's great that the youth services are back within the Department of Education again. But I have to say before I start that unfortunately there is still no standard of youth work pay scale. You know, like there's different titles within youth work. When I started working as a youth worker, and I worked in Belfast, I worked in Dublin, Donegal, Sligo, worked all over the country as a youth worker for different organisations, Froiga, ETB, HYLS. But we still don't have a straightforward pay scale, and I think some of the issues that we're talking about tonight comes from that, because first of all, and then as a trade unionist, it's very hard to unionise people to come together looking for pay agreements or looking for increases in salaries because we don't have one clear full pay scale, and we're often funded. Organisations, people that work as youth workers can be funded through the Department of Justice, Department of Children as well, besides your own department. I know you've made great strides, that that there has been an increase in the youth work budget, but I suppose the percentage, is it 0.2% of the full education budget goes to youth services? You might clarify that when we come back at that. But having said that, we have come a long way, and it's even. I remember when I even got qualified as a youth worker, my parents said to me that they had no idea what it was. That it was because it was such a new profession. So it's great that we're getting that recognition. But I think just from listening to here speaking that, youth services are there because of the lack of multi-annual funding. It is very hard to retain staff. It's hard to plan, and I think everyone would agree this. And I think this is probably one of the main asks from this, is that that we do get that youth organisations get multi-annual funding, not only so that they're able to, that they get they're able to recruit staff, but they're also able to retain staff. And if there was proper pay scales, then incremental pay scales could come in. Like I know Froiga at one stage paid more than Youth Work Ireland, or like I worked in Home Youth Liaison Service. So there's a lot of differential between scales. So a pay scale, one regular pay scale would alleviate an awful lot of that. I think capital projects, like they're coming at the moment, youth services are coming from a very low base. That the investment I know it has increased, but there are so many projects there's so many buildings around the country that need so much that they need a huge amount of upgrade. So I suppose that's where some of the additional capital funding is hoping, and I think that should come from cross departments. Like youth work isn't just a single identity. I suppose youth work, the nature of youth work, and the expression "Mullinoig agus chucky sheet," that is the premise for youth work, and I suppose investment in youth work in early years, and right down, I know some of the organisations I worked in, the Home Youth Liaison Service, we say 8 year. You were 8 year. If it was a targeted youth service, you were able to work with young people as young as 8, whereas others different. So there is a bit of, I suppose, there's a bit of maybe a difference around what services are providing within the youth workspace and within social care as well, and the age that young people or that you're able to work with a certain young people. But I think the investment in capital projects, existing capital projects, but also it's looking at youth spaces for all. I also went over to Youth Work Ireland today, and it's moving away from, of course there's a need for targeted youth work, and there always be, like the UBU projects and like the Justice projects, that there's always a need for targeted youth work where it's referral based and specific money is going into that. But there's also a real need for youth spaces for all and youth work for all, where that any young people should have access to a youth space, and it's there that young people are identified if they need additional needs. And I think that's where that there's professional youth workers that are there, qualified and trained to recognise this family needs a bit of extra support, this young person needs an extra support, and they know whether to go down through, the channels through TUSLAR, through MEHEL, or, Child Protection, that they're able to access those organisations because they work on the ground, and that they know, I suppose, that is the role of a youth worker. And I think, another area that youth workers, from speaking to many of my friends are youth workers and they still work in youth workspace, that they would say because there's so many needs, complex needs for young people are developing, that young people are concerned about housing, they're concerned about addiction, they're concerned of social media, the needs, I suppose, of young people have increased, but I suppose the appreciation, I would call it, or not just monetary appreciation, but the appreciation, both monetary or the need to have proper funding and proper contracts, proper pensions, to make sure that youth workers aren't completely stressed out, that they're not completely overloaded with their work, which often is the case when you're working on the front line like that, that there's not enough resources there to ensure that staff will stay. So I think that that is definitely an area that, and we're going more and more, we're going to rely on youth workers, particularly in the age of around when we're looking at social media. Like, I think there needs to be more youth workers employed specifically to look at, about looking at critically educating people or getting people to critically engage in thought, but also around social media. And I think because youth spaces for all that, the nature of working in a youth centre, the nature of a youth work is that you're open, it's inclusive, it's non-judgmental, that young people feel safe to ask questions or to make sure that they, that they're allowed to be themselves in a space where they're at themselves. So I think that that's another area that we're going to have to continue to look at. And it's great that she said that, other senators have said that within the Education Committee, that youth work gets better emphasis, because I'm on the Children's Committee and now that's been removed from it. So I think that's really important that it does get within those committees. So, Carmarthen.